Welcome to Logical-NDE. My name is Emily, and it is my pleasure to narrate the near-death experiences of those who have seen the other side. If you are new to our channel, welcome. For our regular viewers, please sit back and enjoy today's episode.
My name's Amanda, and I had an out-of-body experience in 2017 that I'm going to share about in this video. I was 35 years old, and I was the passenger in a car with my ex-partner, and we were driving on a high mountain road in Western Canada, and the road it's one of those high mountain roads that's on the side of the mountain where on one side of the road the mountain goes straight up, and then there's the road, and then the other side is like a drop, and there's a concrete guardrail on the side that was about the height of an adult's waist. And there was an oncoming car that lost control, and that car crossed the double center line and was headed straight for us. So our car swerved out of the way onto the gravel shoulder, and it was a really skinny gravel shoulder that was kind of temporary. Like if you look ahead a few less than 100 meters, it actually just ended, and there was just like the road and the mountain. And so our car swerved onto the shoulder to avoid this car, but then because the shoulder itself was kind of getting skinnier and skinnier, we swerved back onto the main road after we missed that guy. But we lost control. It was too fast of a move to make, and our car started spinning like horizontally a couple times and hit another oncoming car that was behind that first car that was headed for us. And then we flipped upside down, and we ended up landing with the roof down and the wheels up on the concrete guardrail. And so we landed upside down. So the front part of our car, like the hood and the front seats, were like over the edge, and the back seat and the trunk were like on the roadside, and we're just kind of like straddling the concrete barrier. So what happened for me, my experience of that accident, was this. And one other thing is, I was working in quite a nearby town to this stretch of highway as a paramedic, and I knew that nearly all of the cars that crash here, if it's a bad crash, a high impact, they just go over the edge. They aren't survivors, and there's a 700-foot drop that goes down. So the paramedics and the police, they usually don't see anybody make it. Anyway, so once our car lost control and we swerved, I was immediately in the belief that I was going to go over the edge and die. It was a split second. This is what I believe is happening. And so what I did, just kind of automatically, I leaned back in my seat and I closed my eyes. I relaxed my muscles as though I was going to be going somewhere, like kind of like when the plane takes off, you just you go with it. And what happened next is where my out-of-body experience starts, and it totally surprised me what happened. I have never, to my recollection, never had a conscious out-of-body experience before that in my life. So the first thing that I remember is not hearing anything and not seeing anything with my physical eyes, not feeling anything on my skin, and a really obvious change was not feeling the heaviness of my body. We all carry around like a body that's like actually pretty heavy if we were to pick another one up, but we're so used to it. We're so used to just like, holding our body up. And suddenly I didn't have that, but I was still wide awake, and I was totally alert and totally perceptive. The real part of me popped out and didn't have access to any of those senses. And where I found myself was a place that was dark. I didn't see anything. I didn't perceive any beings, any religious figures or ancestors. But I also wasn't frightened. There was absolutely no apprehension or anxiety or shock for me to land in this dark space. And even though the accident happened in seconds, being outside of the body in the spiritual world, there's a loss of time as we know it. So a couple seconds on earth could actually be minutes, hours, or longer in the spiritual world. And that's something that I had heard before, but I couldn't really understand. So this is what did happen. I found myself in this place where there was no fright and no concern, and immediately I felt like I wasn't alone there. I felt as though I was surrounded by an invisible, to me, presence of an all-powerful, all-loving, all-understanding, completely safe, all-knowing presence. And this presence had the quality of security. I felt very secure to be in this presence, more secure than I would say I feel in any human being's presence. And the presence had a quality of many, as though there was many invisible beings that were able to perceive me, but that all of those beings were very much in union, so much in union that they together formed this surrounding supportive presence. And I don't know how I knew that, but there was just a knowing. And I realized that this place was familiar to me. There was a huge familiarity, as though I had been here many times, that I had passed through here many times, and that the presence or the beings that were in union, that were there, they knew me so well. They had known me in other lifetimes. They had watched over me in one way or another in this lifetime that I had just stepped out of. That there was no judgment about anything. If anything, there was just love and curiosity about me and what I had been up to since I'd last been there. There was a real welcome, like a reuniting feeling that was coming from them. And I noticed that the parts of me that I could notice there really had no challenging, painful, destructive, negative qualities to them. So things that I would normally experience in life, like fear or mistrust or resentment or like any of that stuff, it was so not necessary here, because I was being accepted by people or beings that had accepted me many times and knew me just as well as I knew myself, knew my intentions. And the qualities that I noticed about this oneness, this union, and about myself there was mostly innocence and clarity and perfection and balance and all these things that sometimes get very overshadowed here on earth, and we don't see that in ourselves and other people so easily. And so there was this huge relief, like, oh, this is the real me. This is the me that I always feel like I'm trying to find and become and remember on earth, and suddenly I am experiencing myself as these things that I've always been searching for, and searching for in other people too. And so I don't know how long in, spirit world time I made these realizations, experienced these knowings, was in the middle of this presence. But then the next thing that I know, I could hear people yelling and screaming. I could hear my partner screaming. I could feel my body again and the weight of it. And I was hunched over. We were both hunched over like this because the roof had crushed. And I was fully back on Earth, and we both survived. I had very little injury other than some whiplash on my shoulder, and he had a concussion, but we were fine. And someone came and got a crowbar and helped us out of the car. And I just remember when I opened my eyes and I was back in my body, all we could see was upside down trees going straight down. The car was like really dangling, kind of like 50-50. Like, I was pretty certain it wasn't going to continue over the edge, but it was kind of like at this precipice where you didn't know, like, if you climbed out of it or if you made a big move or if someone like pushed it the wrong way, if it would keep going. So that's how balanced it really was on that guardrail. So someone let us out of the car, and, you know, like, of course, like, the ambulances and the police were on their way. And I just remember feeling this massive amount of bliss, and not like euphoria, like I'm so excited, I'm just high. No, it was just like this bliss of peacefulness, knowing what I suddenly knew and remembered about myself and about human spirits and how things work. And I thought, you know, no matter that we were just in this car accident and there's going to be, you know, a mess to clean up somehow here, I was just home, or at least on the threshold of home. I was starting to move into like the welcoming committee of, you know, like possibly healthy and well ancestors, angels, you know, deceased relatives. And so knowing that I had just been there and remembering that that is a place that we go when we pass out of this life, again, I say like the threshold, because I had the sense that there was so much more, and that was just the beginning of other dimensions and other spirit worlds. But that was enough for me to remember that we have an existence outside of here, and we're well known there. So I was sitting, I got myself out of the car, and I was sitting on the concrete guardrail, and I was just kind of like staring out into the distance, looking at the trees, totally in this place of feeling like internal safety, like I had never experienced before. And I think because I suddenly realized I was no longer going to have a fear of death in any way, because I realized that my spirit, that a human spirit is, you know, alive and animating a human body, but when it's out of the body, it still is. It still is fully perceptive, fully aware. And it appeared to me through my direct experience that there is the option or the opportunity to also experience the self as quite innocent and perfect and safe and peaceful without all the stuff that, you know, can cloud that. So a great peace came over me with this experience and this knowingness. And, you know, looking back, I naively wanted to just tell everybody, like, oh, you know, this is where I've been. You have you don't need to worry about death, nothing like that. But I realized, you know, pretty quickly that not everybody can relate to that or wants to believe you. So that's what happened that day. And at first, I spent some months in that same blissful state. I took some time off work to make sure that my shoulder was okay to return. And I suddenly became very grateful for life. I started to think, like, you know, if something else happened where I could suddenly die, have I lived a life that is at my highest potential? Have I taken the risks that I want to take? Have I pursued dreams that I have? Or was I just kind of like in this, you know, just doing what society does, doing what you're told you're supposed to do, and not really, you know, like looking outside of that, what could be possible for me outside of that? So I started to kind of look at my life and look at what I wanted to change and realize, you know, like, I don't know if I have tomorrow, so I want to start doing things now. Another thing that started to kind of happen in those first few months is my nervous system had become quite sensitive since this happened. And biologically, scientifically, I don't know how that happens, but many people who experience trauma or, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, find themselves with quite a sensitive nervous system after, which can be a blessing or a curse or a bit of both. So I had a sudden change in being able to, lights started to become much more bright. Sound was much more loud to me. Even touch was it could kind of shock me a little bit if it was unexpected. And on a personal level, just with my emotions and my mental state, I was also starting to notice subtleties and nuances that I guess wasn't paying attention to before. So I would notice red flags in things people would do or say and start to pay more attention to that. I also started to feel more, even with my ambulance patients. Sometimes if someone was feeling nausea, I would feel nausea, and then later during the ambulance calls after I went back to work, after I would start to feel nausea, I would be doing my patient assessment and they would tell me that they were nauseous, or other symptoms I was often feeling in my body when I was around my patients. So it was almost like I was picking up on things that I couldn't pick up on before. And as far as self-work, self-help, inner dialogue, inner reflection, those aren't things that I was too focused on. I was pretty focused on just the busyness of, a typical Western lifestyle. But I started to notice ways that I would allow myself to be manipulated, ways that I would manipulate other people, ways that I wasn't regulating my emotions and I was blaming other people for things that I should have been taking responsibility for. I could see where in many of my relationships I was acting like a people pleaser or a bit of a doormat, not really speaking up for myself, not coming, halfway when it came to, sharing my opinion or speaking up if something wasn't working for me or didn't feel right for me. Now that I had become more sensitive, it became very uncomfortable to be around people like that. And so I started to rise a little bit and speak up for myself more and become less of that doormat and start using muscles that I hadn't really used. Another thing that happened as a result is a lot of my relationships started to change. I ended up leaving my partner. We'd been together for 13 years, but many of the things that already weren't working started to become very loud to me, very exasperated. So that ended, as well as some other significant relationships. I noticed that physical things like material world stuff started to feel very heavy. I ended up selling my house soon after we broke up, and I sold and gave away most of my belongings, furniture, clothes. It started to feel like, oh, why do I have so much stuff? I kind of wear the same clothes pretty regularly. I've read most of the books on the shelf, why are they just there? There were so many things that I started to kind of look at a more practical level. And so after that, I became a bit more of a minimalist. I, even to this day, live out of a suitcase, and I travel a lot. And to be honest, I don't really miss any of it. I've got everything that I need with me at all the time. And, I don't think this is a lifestyle for everybody, but it's an example of how an out-of-body experience can radically change your priorities. I realized that obviously we can't take things with us. We can't take our bank account with us. We can't take the people that we love in our life. So I started to appreciate the things that I had and the people in my life, but not cling to them, because I realized they can be taken in an instant. It's better to be grateful for them and appreciate them. But on the other side in the spirit world, that's an eternal place. The people that we love on this earth, we're gonna see on the other side anyways. So people never really leave us. We just come and go from this earth. And And so after selling my house, I ended up moving myself into my RV camper van, and I spent a couple of years traveling in Western Canada and camping and visiting friends, working just like on creative projects that I never really paid attention to or pursued. And then ended up doing a lot of traveling and seeing places and having experiences that I'd always thought about, but that I just never had the time because I was working too much, and I had my pretty routine, rigid lifestyle. And now I choose to look at life from more of a spiritual perspective than I did before. I know now firsthand from direct experience that even if our body dies, even if our body is left behind, we still exist on that other side, and we exist with that oneness, with that innocence, with that purity, that curiosity. And so now, while I'm still here in the body, a bigger priority for me than before is spending time with other people that value those things, looking for ways to become more like that while I'm in my human body, and be with other beings that already have that figured out, whether it's animals or children or gentle people that are very connected to nature, being around beautiful things like art and like the natural world, and trying to touch into those parts of reality, those parts of life, because I understand that those are the things that are truly us. And also keeping in perspective that we don't have control over when the last day of our life is, to really try and really make the most of taking risks, creating things, doing the things that we want to do now. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know if we're going to get an accident and get incapacitated. There's not going to be a perfect time. So really trying to keep those things always in the forefront of life. And knowing that there is a spiritual world, and being curious about that, and praying and meditating and putting out the intention to align life, actions, behaviors, intentions with the values and the qualities that exist in the higher spiritual worlds, like the same things like purification, like innocence, love, acceptance, safety, belonging, really trying to prepare for going back there one day. And I think that's all.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.